Welcome to the Holistic Feline and Friends podcast, home for all things holistic and healthful for our pets. I'm your host, Angela, also known as the Holistic Feline on Instagram. This season is very special, with the majority of the episodes exposing some sort of huge crack in the pet industry that has misled pet guardians for decades, exposing the truth in a broken system. The intention is to educate and empower pet parents about some of the most dangerous normalized aspects in pet health by bringing truth to light and providing healthy, natural, and holistic alternatives so that our furry loves can live well into their 20s and 30s. The truth can be harsh or hard to hear at times, but it remains the truth. I invite you to listen to this season with an open mind, eyes, ears, and hearts. In this eye-opening episode, we continue the conversation with renowned award-winning integrative veterinarian, Dr. JUDY Morgan. We're exposing a huge pet industry crack in this episode, quite possibly the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing, in my opinion, and largest bamboozlement in the pet industry. We're talking prescription pet food, also known as therapeutic or veterinary diets. We're discussing the truth behind prescription therapeutic pet food, educating you on what's really in most commercial therapeutic prescription pet food, how it can cause more damage, more expense, and ways you can truly improve your pet's health with real human-grade whole foods, no matter the health concern you face. Dr. JUDY is known for her raw honesty, exposing hard truths within the pet industry. She is direct, tell it like it is. There are no limits to what she will bring attention to. She is known as your pet's advocate and enlightens and empowers pet parents on how to be the same. She has won numerous awards, including the 2023 People's Choice Award and the International Association of Top Professionals 2024 Top Holistic Veterinarian of the Decade Award. She has been featured on ABC, CBS, PBS, CNN, Fox News, and many more. She's a best-selling author of 8 books and host of her own Naturally Healthy Pets podcast. We are absolutely honored to have her join us and lend her voice on this very important topic not often spoken about. My hope is that this episode enlightens you, providing information you did not know, and inspires you to make the necessary changes to get your pet back on track to true and lasting health and healing. So without further ado, here is the one and only Dr. JUDY Morgan. Hello, Dr. JUDY. Welcome to our little corner of the world. We are so excited to have you here to talk about such a prevalent aspect in pet health and in vet med. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here.
So let's start out with question number 1. May we begin with a self-introduction? Can you please introduce yourself, who you are, and what you do?
I'm Dr. JUDY Morgan. I am an integrated veterinarian. I started out in traditional medicine, and I've been in veterinary medicine for over 40 years. And my job now, since I sold my 2 veterinary clinics in New Jersey in 2020, is to educate and empower pet parents to get greater health and longevity with their pets, improve their vitality. And so I have an educational platform and an e-commerce store at naturallyhealthypets.com. And my goal is to just make pet parents be able to enjoy more time with their pets and to have healthy, vibrant pets. So we do that through empowering people with education.
I love it. And I will insert my little story how I know you here. So I found you many years ago when you were exposing some sort of pet industry flub. And I just remember being completely enthralled by your raw honesty and no holds barred delivery and empowerment that you exuded to pet parents. It's not often you come across a veterinarian who speaks like that, and you had me at video number 1, and I never left your fan club. I direct all clients, friends, and family to your online educational resources and online shop all the time. You are one of the number 1 resources I use. So thank you for that.
We appreciate that because our goal is to educate as many people as possible. And that's why I do podcasts and have my own podcasts, because we need to reach more people. And I think the tipping point for change in how our pets are cared for is going to come being driven by the pet parents.
I agree. I appreciate your tenacity delivering the hard truths within the pet industry. We're going to dive right into this one, prescription pet food. In my personal opinion, I feel it is one of the ultimate wolf in sheep's clothing aspects in the pet industry. Before we get into exposing prescription pet food at its core, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when I say the words prescription pet food?
It's a farce. There's no medication in there. There's no reason for it to be a prescription. And they are prescribed completely wrong. Prescriptions are meant to be used for a short period of time. For instance, your pet is sick, they have an infection, maybe you need an antibiotic. The antibiotic is used for a short period of time. It is not something that you get a prescription and you renew it month after month after month for the life of your pet. I don't think a veterinarian would ever say, here, your pet needs to take this pill every day, for a prescription pill every day for the rest of their life. If they did, that would be absolutely wrong, because our goal should be to heal the pet and not have them be on chemicals and medications, and to bring about good health. And prescription diets don't do that. It was really a marketing ploy way back when by Hill's Pet Food Company. And they decided that if they could get veterinarians on board with this, it would be a symbiotic relationship. Hey, we say that you have to have a prescription for our food, and then the people have to buy it from the veterinarians, sort of like the fox watching the hen house. There's nothing prescription in them. There's no medications in them. And prescription diet is actually trademarked by Hill's Pet Food. And any other therapeutic diets on the market, they may require a prescription, but they are not allowed to be called prescription diets. They can be called therapeutic diets, veterinary diets, but they are not allowed to be called prescription diets because that is owned by Hill's Pet Food.
So I would say 8 to 9 times out of 10, when I'm talking to a pet parent and they're telling me about the health issues they're having with their pets, their sentence always ends with, my pet is on prescription food, which is then quickly followed by, I can't put them on any other food than prescription. And that's either due to the vet's recommendation or the pet parent feeling if they get off prescription food, the pet's health will decline or loose stools will occur. So this is crazy frustrating for me because I know, matter of fact, if the pet goes on a species-appropriate fresh food diet, circumstances will change and their health will most likely begin to turn around and they'll be on a much better path. So that's kind of like my experience. I'm sure that's everyone's experience.
Yeah, we see that all the time on social media. I get it in emails and messages from people who say, oh, my vet said, particularly my cat has to be on this prescription urinary diet for the rest of his life. And the problem, or they have to be on this kidney diet because they were diagnosed with early stage kidney disease. And unfortunately, particularly when we're talking about our cats, but applies to dogs as well, a highly processed kibble product is absolutely the worst thing we could ever feed to a cat. And it is not a great thing for dogs either. Highly processed kibble is too low in moisture. It is too high in carbohydrates, too low in protein, many times too low in fat, filled with synthetic vitamins and minerals. I mean, there's just so many things that are wrong with it that it's sort of like, where do I start?
Right.
But it is actually, it's like ironic that we take a cat who's dehydrated and kidneys aren't working well, and then we put them on a prescription diet, particularly dry, that doesn't have much moisture in it, when those cats are starved for moisture. They're starved for protein, and we're restricting protein. The urinary diets that people are told their cats need to stay on so that they don't have crystals or they don't have obstructions, a dry diet is absolutely the worst thing we could prescribe for that. And one of the reasons they work is because they have L-methionine in them. L-methionine is there to acidify the urine and therefore hopefully dissolve crystals, as long as they're making crystals that will dissolve in an acidic urine. And L-methionine is also a palatant, which makes the food taste better, so the cats want to eat it. If we didn't have palatants and appetite enhancers sprayed on these foods, there's no way our pets would ever eat them. They are dry, bland, boring, nothing pleasing about them to our pets. So they're actually, they have ingredients put in them to basically get the pets addicted to them, sort of like foods in the human food industry that have MSG and palatants and flavorings added to them to get us addicted to them. So it's no different in the pet industry, and they know exactly what they need to put in there to get our pets to say, no, I only want this. And cats are very tricky because, for instance, if you start your kittens on a dry food, they will become addicted to that texture and that flavoring. So when we take older cats, and this happened to me 30 years ago when I started learning about food, and I said, hey, dry kibble full of carbohydrates is absolutely the worst thing to have my cats on. And that's what all of my cats are eating. How horrible. And it can take 6 to 12 months to get a cat who is addicted to that format of food to accept what we want them to eat, which is high moisture, human grade, species appropriate, which is not going to be high in carbohydrates. It's going to basically be a meat and organ based food, which is what our cats would eat in the wild.
Right.
So my barn cats are out there catching mice and rabbits and birds and eating what they are meant to eat. If I were to introduce dry kibble to them, they probably would go for it because it has so many appetite enhancers on it. And in my world, I call it kitty crack, because if once I got my cats, my older cats way back when, once I got them switched over from that dry kibble to what I wanted them to eat, a species appropriate raw diet, if they ever saw kitty crack put out in front of them, they dive in like they have not eaten in 20 years, even though they love their raw food. They use a lot of tricks to get them to say, oh, I really want this. So it's not good for them, unfortunately. But, if you start your kittens out on that dry food and that's what they're used to, it can be really difficult to get them to change over to what we want them to eat.
Yeah. And it's completely frustrating for me because my thought process is that this is how the pet's health landed here in the first place, with the dead, dry junk food. And the vet's solution is to continue to throw more dead, dry, and or wet junk food at it, but with a paywall and a fancy tagline of prescription food behind it. So in my opinion, they're treating a problem with the same problem. It's throwing already inflamed stones into a fire, and eventually the house will burn down.
Exactly.
Without the right extinguishers, which in this case is species appropriate food.
Exactly.
So, all right, well, let's begin, which I think we already did, but let's begin this expose of his prescription pet food by breaking down what prescription pet food really is. Can you enlighten everyone?
Well, they like to say that there is a lot of research behind it. And so that's what the veterinary industry falls back on. Show us your science. Unfortunately, long-term feeding trials really don't happen with these foods. And for companies that say they do feeding trials, I've done feeding trials with pet food companies, you only need 8 animals to go through the feeding trial for 6 months. So you take 8 animals that are similar in size, age, weight, breed, if at all possible. So usually if they're doing this in a research situation, they tend to use beagles, or they'll have a colony of cats. And so you want the animals to all live in the same environment so that you really only have one variable if you are doing things correctly. So in this case, our variable is, what are they fed? And so you take 8 animals and you put them all on the diet. At the beginning of the trial, you take blood from the animals, and there are only 4 parameters that are measured. So we're not even doing a full chemistry profile. And at the 3-month mark and the 6-month mark, you repeat the lab work. And the animals are getting weighed as you're going through that 6-month trial. So you start with 8 animals. At the end of 6 months, you only have to have 6 animals that make it through the trial. So 2 could die from starvation, 2 could die from heart disease, whatever. They could just drop out of the trial. So you only have to have 6 animals that make it through the trial. And the 4 blood parameters that they measure have to be still within normal bounds. They can change, they can go up, they can go down, as long as they're still within what they consider the normal range. And their weight has to stay, I can't remember the exact, it has to stay within like 10% of whatever they started at. So if you have an 8-pound cat, they, have to weigh still like 7.5 pounds, 7 pounds, and they would be considered to have passed the trial. So when I was in vet school, we had a dog that was actually donated to the university. It was this older couple came in, and they had this extremely obese small dog. It weighed 40 pounds and it should have weighed 10 pounds. It was extremely fat. And the dog was having respiratory trouble. So they brought it in to have it worked up, and the university did all this work and decided that the dog's problem really was that it was so obese. The fat was just, crushing the lungs, crushing the airways. And really what the dog needed was to lose weight. Well, the older couple decided that they couldn't afford all of this, and they ended up donating the dog to the school. So the school decided to do an experiment that in this day and age, we might say this is animal cruelty and you couldn't get away with it. But what they did is they put the dog on a water and vitamin diet. So the dog got a vitamin tablet once a day and water, free choice water. At the end of a few months, the dog's weight was down to normal. So now we went from a 40-pound dog to a 10-pound dog, and the blood work still looked good. And the dog was actually very healthy because it had lost the weight and it had no respiratory problems. So if an animal can go 3 months with water and a vitamin supplement only and do, frankly, well, then a feeding trial for 6 months is pretty meaningless the way that it is set up. I think that in order to do so we did a feeding trial for one of my recipes, and we took 16 dogs, all the same breed and size, all living in the same household. And 8 of them got fed their normal diet. 8 of them got fed the new recipe only. And we did lab work at 0, 3 months, and 12 months. And we did complete chemistry panels, like everything we can test, we tested. And at the end of the 6 months, we had 16 very healthy dogs, all looking great. None of their lab parameters changed. And to me, that was a much better trial because we were looking at all of the blood parameters, and we were doing the weight and complete physical exams, leaving 8 dogs on their regular diet and having 8 dogs on the new diet to see what they look like. So feeding trials, and it's interesting because when you look on some big pet food company websites, they'll say, we use feeding trials. We've got science to back up our food. But when you look at what a feeding trial really is, it's like, I probably could have fed him ground shoe leather and some water and he would have done almost as well. So it doesn't mean that much.
Well, thanks for breaking that down, because I don't think anybody really knows that.
Only us food nerds.
So these foods do not contain, as you said, pharmaceutical drugs and medicinal ingredients. And you did mention that there might be one that you do need a prescription?
You need prescriptions for the therapeutic diets.
Okay.
So even the ones that are not labeled prescription diets, because prescription diets can only be Hill's products. So for instance, let's say you want to go on Chewy.com and you say, I want to buy KD. It'll say right on there, need a prescription from your veterinarian. For instance, Darwin's, Just Food for Dogs. I'm trying to think who else. There's a bunch of them out there. Medicus diets. Some of those are human grade, gently cooked or raw. So we do have other companies that are making therapeutic diets, but they all require, if they are a therapeutic diet, they are going to require a prescription. Now, interestingly, we'll go back to Hill's. They have prescription CD urinary diet. They have a bunch of other urinary diets for cats now and dogs as well. But you can go to the grocery store or to one of the big box stores, and you can buy a Hill's urinary formula. It'll be about 40% less in price and have almost the exact same ingredients and have the same exact effect. It is made for urinary tract health. So you can spend $90 a bag at your veterinarian, or you can go to a big box store and buy a urinary tract diet for $60, and basically they have the same effect. Because again, there's nothing medicinal in the prescription one. There's nothing medicinal in the urinary tract diet at the big box store. I mean, I think it's a farce. Now, there are some diets. There's UD, and I haven't sold these diets in so long. I, have a little trouble with them. UD is for a different kind of urinary stone. And there's also SD, which is stone diet, if it's still called that. But SD is to dissolve struvite stones, and it is so low in minerals and protein that it can only be fed for 30 days. And it's made to dissolve the stones. And one of the problems that we see is that these diets that are meant to be fed for 30 days are prescribed over and over and over again. And I actually did have a client once who killed their pet by keeping their dog on RD, which is the reducing diet.
Oh my gosh.
So this was very early in practice for me. I worked at a small animal clinic where really every single patient was on some sort of a Hill's prescription diet. The owner of the clinic made a lot of money selling prescription diets. So like puppies all went on PD, the pediatric diet, and senior dogs all went on GD, the geriatric diet.
Something for everything.
Yeah, instead of saying let's just feed a puppy food, it was, oh no, they had to be on this particular one.
Right.
Because you got a lot of kickbacks for doing that.
Right.
So this one client had a little miniature schnauzer that was obese and, was suffering from chronic pancreatitis, as miniature schnauzers like to do, had a lot of issues. So it was put on RD to lose weight. Now, mistakenly, the owner kept coming in month after month after month, and at the front desk would say, I need more RD. And the people at the front desk kept giving him more RD without ever checking or saying, hey, have we seen the dog? Have we weighed the dog? The dog came in a year later. It was a rack of bones and basically died of malnutrition.
Oh my gosh. This is heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking because it was so preventable.
That's what I was just going to say. Yes.
It's absolutely preventable. So prescription diets are meant to be, like when they originally made them, it was originally meant to be a short-term prescription, just like a prescription of antibiotics or anti-inflammatories. Unfortunately, we are now in a bit of a mindset, a human mindset of, oh, we need to get a pill for that, and pick whatever that is. We need a pill for that. And well, he's doing well on that pill, so we should keep him on it. So we, particularly for dogs, not so much for cats, because they're so sensitive to drugs that we can't leave them on these things long term for a lot of the drugs that are out there. But dogs are put on non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, and they're on them for life. Not good. Right. A lot of problems associated with that. But we do that with a lot of drugs. Gabapentin. All the veterinarians are in love with gabapentin right now, and they want every animal who's coming into the clinic to be on gabapentin, especially for cats, because it's sort of sedating. And they're like, oh, it'll mellow them out. We don't have to deal with the 18 weapons on the end of their toes and the teeth that come after us. So we want all cats to be very mellow when they walk in the door. I don't think that drugging our animals is the answer. I think we all need to learn how to handle animals better, and that includes the owners. But I had one of my dogs, just mellow little 10-pound guy. I needed an abdominal ultrasound. He had heart disease, and I was pretty sure he had cancer, and I wanted the ultrasound to look for it. And I had to search high and low to find somebody who would do an ultrasound without sedation. Mm-hmm. And his heart was too bad for sedation. I mean, he was not in great shape, and I could not convince anybody to do it without sedation. I finally did find somebody to do it without sedation. She listened to his heart and she said, "Oh my gosh, who would want to sedate this dog? His heart sounds terrible." I said, "Well, there's my point."
Right.
But veterinary medicine is changing a lot, not for the better. Corporate medicine is not good, and this is way off track. The mindset of, "Oh, good, we've got him on that prescription diet. He just needs to stay on it," is absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong.
And that's the perfect placement to mention. Dr. Judy will be back in the next episode for part 2, where she explains medication and the overuse of meds and chemicals in pet care. Gabapentin being one of many we will talk about, so be sure to tune into that one. It's certainly worth noting here that there is a regulatory loophole attached to prescription foods. They are regulated as food, not medication. The FDA exercises enforcement discretion, allowing manufacturers to make health claims as long as the products are sold under veterinary supervision, hence why they're available at your vet offices. And the requirement for a prescription is primarily a manufacturer-imposed marketing and distribution strategy, like you just said earlier, and it ensures that a veterinarian monitors the animal's health while also creating an exclusive sales channel.
Well, we hope they're monitoring, but for instance, in the case of my dog that starved to death, nobody was monitoring.
There you go. And that is exactly why I always say we need to be our pet's best and loudest healthcare advocate. It's why I have this podcast and why I share the knowledge learned so pet parents can be well informed and empowered going into the next vet visit, knowing what is best for their pet. Just as you did with advocating for ultrasound and no sedation.
Yep.
Unfortunately, not all vets are doing what's best for our pets.
Well, they go with what they're taught. And unfortunately, the vet schools and all veterinary education, so continuing education, is highly, highly influenced by big pharma and big pet food. And I don't know that we'll ever break, and now corporate medicine, and I don't know that we'll ever break those apart because that's where all the funding comes from.
Right. Yeah. So you did mention a little history about how Hill's prescription food was birthed, and I'm going to add a little more history to that. I'm going to take us back to the late 1930s and give a little history lesson before I go into the most common health issues associated with prescription food. In the late 1930s, Dr. Mark Morris Sr., a veterinarian, discovered that diets containing large quantities of poor quality protein were causing widespread canine kidney failure. And so the same notion still rings today. So connect the dots on that. But he wanted to create a better quality pet food to address and treat kidney disease in his patients. And so he did just that. He eventually partnered with Burton Hill from the Hill Packing Company in 1948 to market and mass produce and can his formulas. What we know today as Hill's prescription diet was born. And since then, there have been several other brands who've jumped onto this bandwagon following Hill's financial success with the formulas. I don't follow it fully, but I knew that there were at least 4 big pet food brands that offer the prescription foods, therapeutic, and veterinary diets, and a lot of smaller companies now. But the ones that you mentioned earlier, I had no idea. It's really a thing now.
It is a thing. But Nestle, Purina, Mars with Royal Canin, Hills, Blue Buffalo now has. They're all doing it.
Yeah.
They figured they found the market, found there's money in that.
So, okay, well, let's get into the most common health conditions associated with prescription foods. And I'll read the robust list, and then you can add your expertise. So we have skin and food sensitivities, often referred to as hypoallergenic diet with hydrolyzed protein. And we'll talk about hydrolyzed protein in a bit. I have a question about that. Urinary care for stones, crystals, and bladder. Kidney renal support and kidney disease management. Digestive, gastrointestinal care, and pancreatitis. Joints and mobility support. Metabolic, weight reduction and management. Liver disease management. Diabetic formula with low carbs for blood sugar regulation. And that should tell you something, that their other standard formulas are saturated with carbs and starches. And they even have one with extra fiber. that's targeted for the biome. So they really took the top health conditions they see in their vet offices that they also own and created custom food to address them. And this is a little thing that I call feeding the beast, which I'll explain that concept a bit later. But what are your thoughts on throwing more dry food at pets with kidney and renal diseases and failure, for example, and then also the diabetic formula with low carbs?
Their diabetic formulas with low carbs tend to be more the canned and wet formulas because you cannot make an extruded kibble low carb. You have to have enough carbs and starch to hold it together to go through the extruder.
Right.
So an extruded kibble is going to be about 50% carbs minimum. It's just the nature of the beast. Urinary formulas basically have things in them to adjust the pH of the food so that it adjusts the pH of the urine. So if you have a pet who's making stones in acidic urine, then you add things to the food to make a basic urine. If they have something that, struvite stones that form in a basic urine, then you put something in to acidify the urine. It's really interesting because we know that cranberry extract and D-mannose can be very, very helpful for urinary issues. So you'll see that sometimes on the ingredient list on the bag of food. But when you're reading an ingredient list and you get to the chemical soup, which is the vitamins and minerals that are added in, you'll see salt. Salt is never more than 0.5% of the food. If the cranberries and blueberries and spinach and all the good things are below salt, there's probably one blueberry in that bag or one cranberry. So it's not enough to make a difference, but they'll advertise it as, with cranberry extract for health or whatever. For the joint products and the brain health products, they have omega-3s added. So, or we could feed them a diet that has more omega-3s, it has a better omega-6 to 3 ratio. So we'd like to see an omega-6 to 3 ratio of less than 5 to 1. Kibble is usually 30 to 1. So way too many omega-6s, which are highly inflammatory, versus omega-3s, which are anti-inflammatory. So that has to do with sourcing of our proteins. A grass-fed happy cow, that beef is going to be much higher in omega-3s than confinement-raised beef that we're scraping off the slaughterhouse floor. The joint and brain products, they add omega-3s. Okay, well, I could feed my dog whatever I wanted to and add omega-3 supplement, a fish oil.
Right.
I'm going to get a better benefit because it's going to be a nice fresh, not a rancid fish oil that I'm adding at the time of feeding. The metabolic ones, okay, we're adding fiber and decreasing carbs. It's what we should be feeding anyway.
Right.
The new GI biome products, they're basically putting probiotics in there. Again, we know that gut dysbiosis contributes to almost every problem that our pets have, every inflammatory problem, every immune system problem, behavior problems, all go back to the gut microbiome. And when we feed our little tiny carnivores or carnivorous omnivores in the case of dogs, when we feed them an inappropriate diet that is loaded with starches and carbs and synthetic vitamins and minerals and not good protein sources, yes, we get dysbiosis in the gut. So, okay, we'll throw some probiotics and a little bit more fiber in there. Poof, we have a GI food. Again, we could feed a species appropriate diet and still maybe add a probiotic, a better probiotic that hasn't gone through all the processing.
Yes.
And come up with something better for them. Liver diets, you can, if you have a pet with liver disease, fatty liver disease in cats, elevated liver enzymes, first of all, half the time when I see elevated liver enzymes in a pet, I want to look at what food they're eating. And very commonly, if they're eating particularly a dry kibble that has a lot of grains in it, those grains probably had molds and they probably have aflatoxins. And if we get rid of that in the diet, suddenly those liver enzymes miraculously come down because we stop feeding what is causing the damage to the liver. The interesting thing with AFCO, they have a minimum amount of copper that pet foods need to include. They don't have a maximum. And so let's say the ideal number is 7. Some of these foods are at 80. And doesn't matter. They can be as high as they want. It can be really easy to solve that problem by saying, hey, let me just feed a food that's not got way too much copper. Oh, look, it's got 4 copper sources added in and it's got a lot of liver in it. There's a lot of copper in there. So we can solve all these things that these prescription diets are supposedly fixing by feeding real food. And, maybe we need to add in supplements. Yeah. But real food is the solution to all of this. All of these animals with food sensitivities, IBD, which, by the way, that is not a diagnosis, that's a description. Inflammatory bowel disease. It means they have an inflamed bowel. It doesn't tell you what's causing it. It doesn't tell you how to fix it. It just means it's inflamed. And hydrolyzed diets, I hate them.
Thank you.
So hydrolyzed means that they're using some sort of a chemical process to break the protein particles down into smaller particles. And so all these animals with dysbiosis also have leaky gut. So leaky gut is swelling in the cells of the gut, and they're swollen to the point where the cell junctions start to pull apart. And so the proteins in the food that they're eating, those molecules are exposed to the bloodstream as the blood flows by all the cells. Normally, those tight cell junctions in the gut would keep the blood on one side and the food on the other side. When those cell junctions start to pull apart, the protein molecules that are in the gut are being exposed to the bloodstream, and the immune system is going, wait a minute, that's a cow. I'm a cat. Cats don't have cows in them. We should attack the cow. So this is a very basic way to put it. But so when we do a hydrolyzed product, we take those protein molecules and we break them down into such small particles that the body doesn't recognize it as foreign, supposedly. But most of the hydrolyzed diets are made from chicken, which is one of the most highly reactive foods because poor quality chicken products are used because they're cheap in just about everything. Also, we use egg cell lines for vaccines. So that kind of sensitizes the pets to the whole chicken thing anyway when they're over vaccinated. They also use hydrolyzed soy. Well, soy is not something that any of our animals should be eating.
Right.
I don't think they're herbivores and they should not be eating that. And then the other one that is very popular and the most expensive is hydrolyzed chicken feathers, which they have relabeled as poultry protein hydrolysate. Because if you're the pet owner and you see on the label hydrolyzed chicken feathers, you go, what? You want me to pay $120 for a bag of chicken feathers to feed my pet? And that's the only protein in there?
Right.
Oh my gosh. So, people like me went crazy with this when they first started that diet, and it was so expensive. And I said, really? People are paying this amount of money for chicken feathers? So I was at an AFCO meeting, which is the regulatory body, the Association of Animal Feed Control Officials. And there was a petition to change the name of hydrolyzed poultry feathers or chicken feathers to poultry protein hydrolysate. Because as a pet owner, you'd be like, poultry, that means birds. Okay. That's chickens and turkeys. Yeah, this must be chicken and turkey protein. Got it. No problem with that. But if you knew it was feathers, you'd have a big problem with the amount of money they're charging. Which, by the way, feathers are highly digestible. So we have a farm and we process our own meat chickens. And when we do that, we have a lot of feathers. At the beginning, my daughter was like, oh, I'm going to take all these feathers. I'll put them in a pillowcase. I'll run them through the wash. I'll run them through my dryer. And I'll be able to sell chicken feathers on Facebook Marketplace because everybody's going to want them for making wreaths and decorating and blah, blah, blah. No, nobody wanted them. And she had all these chicken feathers, and literally her house had chicken feathers everywhere. So she said, well, I've got to get rid of these chicken feathers. I'm going to add them. She feeds raw, and she has 2 large dogs and a cat. And she said, I'm going to put a handful of chicken feathers in every one of their meals and let them eat them and see what happens. They ate them no problem. It was mixed in with their raw food. They ate them no problem. And she thought, okay, when I clean up my backyard, I'm going to find pooped out chicken feathers everywhere. None.
It's good for fiber. Yeah.
Yeah, they digested them completely and broke them down. Not only are they a good fiber source, trace minerals, manganese, zinc, a lot of the things that we have a hard time when we're formulating diets, it's like, oh my gosh, I always have to add some oysters or something to get the zinc content. Well, we could add fur or feathers,
Right.
but those are not approved to be used in pet food. So that's why, like the prey model raw people, if you're going to feed prey model raw, you have to feed the whole animal. If you don't want to add any supplementation and you don't want to add any vegetable matter, then you better be feeding the fur, the feathers, the feet,
Right.
the brain, the eyeballs. You have to include it all. So that's way off topic. But so, hydrolyzed products to me are horrible.
I agree.
I had a rescue dog that came to me once, and oh my gosh, the people had spent $10,000 trying to heal her gut issues. They ran out of money. And so they gave her up to rescue, hoping that we could find and solve the problem. And I put the dog on a whole food diet, and we did manage to solve the problem. But she came on a hydrolyzed diet, and literally it looked like, the cereal corn pops. They're like these puffed yellow things. That's what it looked like. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this dog is eating corn pops, which I wouldn't feed to my kids. Why am I feeding it to this dog?
Yeah. I mean, I hear the term all the time, hydrolyzed protein. It's a term that I hear when it comes to why pet parents feel that they can't go off prescription foods.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly frustrating because I'm like, if you actually knew what it was and how it doesn't necessarily help or assist.
It's not curing anything.
Right.
And it's not long term. It's not a good way to feed your pet.
Right.
It does not provide good nutrition for them to thrive. I mean, many of those animals, first of all, we try to heal the gut. So we've got to get the leaky gut junctions to heal themselves and put themselves back together. And there's a lot of different ways that we do that. But then I will put them on a novel protein and something that's very easy to digest. So a lot of times, rather than using raw diets, which I adore, a lot of times for these animals, I will go with a gently cooked diet because it's already partially digested. So I love to use a slow cooker for these because the food really breaks down, but it's at low temperatures. And you maintain the moisture, you maintain all the nutrients as long as you feed all the juice and everything along with it. And I have one little dog in New York City that the owner has to feed alligator. The dog has done so well on alligator, but in New York City, you can imagine it might be a little tricky to find alligator routinely, but she's managed to do it.
There's a company that actually has alligator as a novel protein.
There is an alligator diet now. Shepherd Boy makes an alligator diet, which is great because now we're finding other companies that are
fetching foods as well. Yeah.
Fetching foods. Okay.
Yep.
So we're finding companies that are starting to do these sort of things. But when we look at those foods, not only do they have to have a novel protein, but they can't have 50 ingredients and they can't have synthetic vitamins and minerals.
Right.
Because if they do, the body is going to react to that. And there are some people who say, that's a fallacy. The synthetic vitamins and minerals are no problem. I strongly disagree. So pets who have significant inflammation in their bowel and gut dysbiosis, it can be a challenge to get them on whole foods, but it can be done. I've never had a patient that we weren't able to get them off the hydrolyzed food. And, sometimes you have to be persistent and it can take a while and you have to work at it gradually. But I've never had one that has had to stay on it. I did not stock hydrolyzed products in my clinics. It's just not something we did.
Yeah. We were at Super Zoo last year and there was a kibble company that was trying real hard to sell us on it. And hydrolyzed protein was his biggest selling point. And I think my head exploded when he said it. But what I think is so crazy is unless the conditions were congenital, like the animal was born with it, all those conditions that we mentioned were most likely caused by poor quality diet in the first place and can either be reversed or healthily managed with fresh species appropriate food.
Yeah.
And that is without a sick pet visit to the vet and without a vet visit to replenish prescription food. Once they're on an appropriate fresh food diet for their species, the animal will then have the proper foundation to begin to heal themselves and their immune system will improve greatly. This next question is a loaded question. What's really in prescription pet food, including the quality of ingredients?
It depends on the company. So the big companies, they're using rendered ingredients for their proteins very commonly. They use rendered ingredients like animal fat, beef and bone meal, a lot of things that are going to most likely have some toxins in them. So, the head of the largest group of plants in the country gave the keynote at one of the AFCO meetings one year. And in his keynote address, he said it is virtually impossible to have a rendered product that does not have euthanasia solution in it.
Mm-hmm.
And FDA knows that. FDA doesn't care about that. As a matter of fact, euthanasia solution was found in a large company's dog and cat food products a few years ago. And FDA said, the levels aren't high enough to be actionable. I'm sorry. How much euthanasia solution is too much for my pet? Oh, yeah, that would be 1 drop. Thank you very much.
Right.
So, unfortunately, FDA chooses to look the other way. Susan Thixton just had a post the other day talking about the synthetic vitamin K, the sodium metadione bisulfate, I think it's called, is not approved for use in animal food. It's only approved for use in poultry feed. But it is used by many companies in pet food, even though it's not an approved ingredient. And when she asked about it, FDA said, we don't really see a problem with it. Okay, it's never gone through testing, it's not an approved ingredient, but you don't see a problem with it. I mean, if we took another ingredient, like if we put hemp in food, oh my gosh, they would be all over that. That's not an approved ingredient. You can't
Right.
possibly use that. So it's just what they choose to enforce and what they choose not to enforce. For instance, it is illegal on paper to have animals that died not by slaughter. So animals that are in the food chain that go to the slaughterhouse to be slaughtered to be used for human food. Those animals are being slaughtered to get their meat at that point. If a cow dies out in the field of whatever unknown disease, lays there for a couple of days in the sun, gets picked up by a guy with an open truck with a whole bunch of other dead animals in it, goes to the rendering plant, sits in the parking lot in the sun in a big heap, and then it goes into the rendering vat. On paper, that is illegal to be used for food, but the FDA chooses to not enforce that.
Mm-hmm.
Their answer to us is, what, you want all that to go into a landfill? Well, I don't think that my pet is the repository for your waste products of really disgusting stuff. Something new that just passed is that the certain, I think it's bass, from the Chesapeake Bay region, the fishermen catch these, I think they're blue bass. And if they're over 30 inches long, people are not allowed to eat them because they have so many toxic metals and mercury and all these chemicals in them. And they store it in the fatty parts of the fish. So before the smaller fish are sent for human food use, they are supposed to strip out the fatty parts because that's where the chemicals and the heavy metals all tend to accumulate. And so they just passed a law in Maryland saying that all of the fish that are too big and all those fatty parts with all the heavy metals can be sent to pet food.
Oh, gosh.
Now, why it is okay to use all these heavy metal chemicals in food for our pets, but not okay for us? I'm sorry. No.
Yeah.
Like it makes no sense to me that the people who make the laws think that our pets don't matter and that they're I mean, I'm sorry, my animals are members of my family, and if it's not human grade, this is how I feel about every single product that is on my website and in my warehouse. It has to be human grade. I have to be willing to eat anything that is in my warehouse, or the soaps and shampoos. Actually, I do use pet products for my soaps and shampoos for
Yeah.
me. I have to be willing to, they have to be that quality in order for me to use it on my pets. And, I look at how many households have toddlers and small children. And I don't know about you, but as a kid, I ate dog treats.
Yeah, I did too. Oh my gosh, it's so funny. I did
I
too.
chewed on dog kibble.
Why? Why do we do that?
Yeah, well, I don't know, but how many households have children that are eating dog treats and dog food out of the bowl? There's
Yeah.
been more recalls for salmonella contamination in dry kibble than there ever has or ever will be in raw pet food. Yet that's what our children
Yeah.
are picking up off the floor, crawling through, putting in their mouths. It's on their fingers. They're feeding it to the dogs and then licking their fingers. Do I want my children exposed to eating euthanasia solution? No. So why would these heavy metals in fish be allowed in pet food when they're not allowed in the human food chain when our children are going to nibble on this?
Right.
We know it's going to happen.
Right. Right. And I think all the things that are allowed in pet food that are not allowed in human food, I believe is a crime against
Oh, yeah.
not only humanity, but also the animal kind. It should be illegal to even sell anything of sorts as a food. Like, it's completely disgusting. And then, these same ingredients are in the prescription food. So to call it a therapeutic food with euthanized solution in it and diseased animals, and it's a crime. It's a crime against all of us.
Well, and a lot of the fiber sources are the waste products, again, from the grain industries. It's like, oh, well, we took all the nutritional part of it out, and now we're left with all these like wheat hulls or wheat middlings, and it's like they have no nutritional value.
Right.
It's a filler.
Right.
Why do I need that? It's not. It's a way to market waste products and make money for them instead of just throwing them away.
Yeah, I don't know where in the world and how this happened. The animals are seen through the eyes that they are lesser than humans. And so that their quality of food and whatnot is just way less than what humans would do or eat. It's very sad because they're actually way more evolved beings than humans will ever be. They're smarter than any human on the planet. So it's really sad.
Well, if we look at like grocery store waste, so all of the outdated dairy products, the outdated, yogurts, the breads, the bakery products, all of that stuff goes in a big dumpster behind the grocery store. It's all picked up and then it's ground up and ground into livestock feed with the plastic wrappers. Like, they don't take everything out of the wrappers. It all just gets ground up and mixed in with the feed, and that is feeding our livestock. So those plastics have phthalates in them, which are endocrine disruptors. We're feeding it to our cows, and then we're drinking that milk. Well, that makes perfect sense.
Right.
We're feeding it to pigs. Where I used to live in New Jersey, there were a lot of pig farms nearby. All the restaurant waste, all of the grocery store waste, it goes to those pig farms. There's a lot of restaurant waste. There's a lot of food waste. People are very wasteful. We know that. That's one of the things I love about my farm. All kitchen waste goes to our chickens. Chickens are so good at recycling food waste. So, what do you do with your baked potato skins that nobody wants to eat? Well, chickens are really good at making those into eggs. But that's, again, I'm feeding them healthy foods.
Right.
I'm not feeding them waste products. But that's, unfortunately, our entire food system is kind of screwed up.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm going to take a little minute to go over specific items that are in the foods, and then also what the FDA and the National Renders Association is a part of in the pet industry. So what you find in the commercial pet food, as well as the prescription food, is diseased and decaying animals, rendered meats, byproducts, fillers, artificial preservatives, spray-ons, euthanized animals, roadkill, plastic tags and packaging, additives, synthetic vitamins and minerals to compensate for the lack of nutrition. And because of the high heating process, like any other dry food, chemical reactions form during the high heat extrusion manufacturing process that create cancer-causing carcinogens in the food. And so the FDA, which we mentioned a little bit, allows in our pets' food contamination by industrial chemicals, contamination by natural toxins, contamination by filth, microbiological, contamination by drug residues, contamination by pesticides in excess of the permitted tolerance or action level, and pesticides contamination in which the pesticide is unapproved for use on a food or feed commodity. So here's another mind bender tidbit of info that listeners may not know. The pet industry does not have to disclose the source of their meats. The National Renders Association is in charge of recycling animal carcasses from the leftovers of human food processing plants, slaughterhouses, euthanized animals, some of which are from shelters and then some, ranchers and farmers where their animals have died, like you had mentioned, and also roadkill. This recycled blend of all these carcasses is what ends up in our pet's bowl, marketed to pet lovers as a quote-unquote complete and balanced diet, after adding synthetic vitamins, minerals, and preservatives, making it profitable. And this is both in prescription and non-prescription foods. So like I said, this is a crime against humanity and our pets' health. It's absolutely disgusting that this is even allowed to be in our pets' food. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, I want to include some important facts here. Rules that guide the pet food industry benefit the corporations over the consumer and the health of the pet. It's plain and simple as that. And so I want to break down the special terminology AFCO created for packaging. This applies to the front and back of the packaging as well as within the ingredient list. And this is important to know because it indicates how much animal protein your pet is getting, if any at all. And these will be terms that you see on the bag. So the term formula, dinner, entree, or nugget. So if you see chicken dinner or chicken formula on the bag, it means that the recipe must contain at least 25% of the named ingredient. If water is included, it must be 10% of the total product. If you see the term with, so like dog food with chicken, it means a minimum of 3% of the named ingredient is required in the recipe. And if you see the term flavor, so chicken flavor, you see this a lot on treats, and actually some of these prescription bags I looked at, and they use the term flavor on their bag. And so this means that it may contain little to no named ingredient. It can contain any protein, and it may be flavored as meat. The package could contain meats, but doesn't have to. And it's acceptable that the package can contain an image of fresh meat, such as steak or salmon, and not have any of it in the product. So that is deception at its core.
Yep.
And so, as you said, I want to remind everybody that our cats should be consuming food made up of 95 to 97% animal protein, and dogs at a higher end of 85 to 95% protein.
Yep.
So with these numbers, AFCO determined our pets are in a chronic state of nutritional deficiency and dehydration. And we're just asking for the pets' illnesses to be out the wahoo because we're setting it up for that.
Yep.
So you touched on this a little bit too, and I think this is important. Not a lot of people know this. So before we go into comparing the ingredients of prescription food and non-prescription, can you please share insider tips regarding ingredient lists? How they are listed in descending order, with the first ingredient supposedly indicating the highest amount in the recipe. However, the loophole they all use in ingredient splitting.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. In Europe, they have to actually tell you the percentage. So if the ingredient list says whole chicken, and then it might say whole corn, and then it might say rice, it'll say chicken 30%, whole corn 29%, rice 20%. But they're listed, whatever the majority ingredient by weight is, that goes first, and then it goes down from there. So like I said, if you see things below salt, there's very little in there. So once you hit the vitamin mineral list, if there's any real food names below all the chemical soup, there's really not a whole lot in there. And so ingredient splitting is how they get away with putting a lot more carbohydrates and a lot more of something in there. So peas and corn are two ingredients that we see ingredient splitting a lot. So it may have beef as the first ingredient, and then it may say pea protein, and then it may say whole peas, and then it might say pea hulls or some other part of the pea. And so they'll do that with corn too. It might have whole corn, it might have, can't remember all the different ways they label corn. But so that you basically may be buying mostly peas, because when you add up the three different types of peas that are in there, they do this with lentils too, because there'll be green lentils, red lentils, lentil hulls, like, all the different kinds. So when you add up, so let's say your first ingredient is whole chicken, that might be 30%. But when you add up everything else and you start adding up all the carbohydrates, you might end up with 55% carbohydrates. So you're not feeding a species appropriate diet for dogs or cats, because there's just not enough meat protein in there. I really like the companies, and we see this a lot more in the gently cooked and the raw, the smaller companies. They will really break it down, and it will have beef liver, beef heart, beef kidney. So all the different organs are broken down. You see what order they're in, and you really have a better understanding of the ingredients that are in there, versus something like beef meal. That could be any part of the cow.
Right.
The whole cow broken down. We don't know. If you see meat meal, that's an unnamed protein. That could be roadkill. That could be pigs, cows, chickens. And so if you have an animal who does have GI sensitivities or allergies, food sensitivities, and you know that they don't tolerate chicken, then you don't ever want to buy something that has meat meal, because there's a good chance there's some sort of chicken in there. You don't want to buy anything that is poultry meal, because that could be any bird, any farm meat bird. So it could be goose, duck, turkey, chicken. You don't know. So, like, for instance, if you have an animal that won't tolerate chicken but does tolerate turkey, then you want to look for, if there's a meal. I don't like meals in general, but if you're getting a meal, that's basically the dehydrated, dried powder product of that animal. If you have an animal with a chicken sensitivity, you can buy turkey meal, but you don't want to be buying poultry meal that's going to have chicken in there guaranteed. So there's a lot of different ways that they disguise things. Animal Digest is like the worst of the worst.
What is that? Is that like stomach? What is that?
So Animal Digest is a rendered, it's basically all the animals that are in the rendering pot.
Right.
When you cook everybody together, so it could be any animal, that's why it's called Animal Digest. Cook it all down and you make a powder, that's Animal Digest. So it's really bad. Guaranteed there's euthanasia solution in there, and it could be any animal. So there's a couple of probiotics on the market, marketed by the big pet food companies, that the base ingredient is Animal Digest. Run away.
Wow.
Never want to see Animal Digest in anything.
Well, that's funny that you said that, because I'm going to cross over to ingredients. Because when I was reading these the other night, I was like, what is such and such digest? So, okay, everyone, get ready to have your mind blown, and hopefully some aha moments along the way. When you hold up a bag of prescription, or shall I say therapeutic diets, and non-therapeutic, the ingredients are keenly similar, only swapping flavors and the type of carb or corn for another. The placement of the item on the ingredient list will differ slightly, indicating the quantity of that ingredient may be different, but the ingredient themselves are the same. So here's an example from one of the big pet food companies. These are the ingredients verbatim on the back of the dry bag. This is from their, we'll call it therapeutic kidney formula, which also states on the bag with chicken. So there's potentially a minimum of 3% of chicken in the recipe. All right. First ingredient, brewer's rice, chicken fat, brown rice, whole grain sorghum, chicken, dried beet pulp, egg product, hydrolyzed chicken flavor. So we all know what flavor means. So there might not even be real chicken in that hydrolyzed chicken flavor. Corn protein meal, fish oil, pork liver flavor, calcium carbonate, and then just followed by a bunch of synthetic vitamins, minerals, natural flavors, and preservatives. So that is the therapeutic formula. The standard formula, comparing those ingredients, are chicken, cracked pearled barley, brown rice, brewer's rice, whole grain wheat, whole grain corn protein meal, chicken fat, chicken liver flavor, soybean meal, and then again followed with a bunch of synthetic vitamins, minerals, natural flavors, and preservatives. Pretty much the same thing.
Except that the non-prescription one is better because it actually has chicken at the top.
And I said that too. It's sad.
And you pay a lot more for the therapeutic diet that literally the first 4 ingredients are basically waste products. I mean, rice and sorghum, they're using whole rice and sorghum, but the beet pulp is a waste product and brewer's rice is a waste product.
Thank you for breaking that down. And this is a fun game. So I have 3 more to mention. So just when you thought it couldn't get worse, these ingredients for the skin allergy food sensitivity formula blew my mind. So this is also verbatim for the skin allergy. Water, brewer's rice, rice protein concentrate, egg product, soybean oil, coconut oil, flaxseed, fish oil, hydrolyzed chicken flavor. There it is again. Rice, dried beet pulp, calcium carbonate, and then a bunch of synthetic vitamins, minerals, natural flavors, and preservatives. That one also has carrageenan, a cancer-causing food additive linked to inflammation, gut, and digestive issues.
It's got to be a canned food because water's your first ingredient.
Yes. Okay, and 2 more for good measure. These are ingredients in a renal formula for cats by another big brand. Corn, chicken fat, pork digest. I was like, when I read that, I was like, what the heck is that? And now I'm happy I know. Brewer's rice, corn gluten meal, pea fiber, fish meal, natural flavors, dried chicory roots, wheat gluten, fish oil, calcium carbonate, and then a slew of synthetic vitamins, minerals, and preservatives. And then the last one, for weight management, this is also verbatim off the back of the bag. Chicken byproduct meal, powdered cellulose, tapioca, wheat gluten, corn gluten meal, natural flavors, dried chicory roots, chicken fat, potassium chloride, psyllium seed husk, followed by a bunch of synthetic vitamins, minerals, and preservatives. How do we feel about that?
Well, cellulose is pretty much, it's plant fiber. I like to say sawdust, but yeah. So you can see why an animal would not thrive being put on that weight management product long term. Nothing good. And the cat renal, I mean, the first ingredient is corn. Cats are not carnivores. We had to get way down there before we even got fish meal in there. I mean, they're trying to make it a really low protein diet. And it's really interesting when we look at cats that are started on, and I just saw a journal article about this, and you know that they paid to get this journal article published, talking about how restricting protein very early on when cats are first diagnosed with kidney disease increases their lifespan exponentially, which is a bunch of malarkey, because what it does is it starves their body of protein, and then they have muscle wasting, and then they're immobile, and they are these little skinny dinosaurs with no muscle mass left. It's just awful. Cats are not meant to survive on corn and chicken fat and pork digest and rice and corn gluten meal. What I found in practice is that and actually one of my 18-year-old cats at his last lab work was diagnosed as in kidney failure. I'm like, well, he's not in failure. He's got slightly elevated kidney values for, 18-year-old cat. Guess what I'm doing? He's continuing to eat his raw diet, which is a high moisture diet, which is exactly what he needs. And it has a lot of protein in it, which is exactly what he needs to maintain his muscle mass.
Right.
So in my opinion, we treat these animals wrong. And if we allow them, one of my dogs with heart failure, so there's 4 stages, A through D. He was D. He was given 3 months to live, and we got 24 months. So yay. But I did not put him, and he was put on very strong diuretics. And they said, well, the reason he only has 3 months to live is because these diuretics will wreck his kidneys.
Oh,
I'm like, oh,
that's
that's
great.
Got drugs, got side effects. So I said, well, that's fine. I'm going to go home and do my thing. And I left him on his raw diet, and I did not start restricting his protein until he was in stage 4 kidney disease, which was 23 months after the prognosis of 3 months. And so for that last month, I said, might need to bring your protein down a little bit now because your values are not looking so good and you're losing too much weight and we need to get some weight back on you, which, he had so many problems going on. But he did not need that protein restriction. And if I had restricted that protein too early, that would have been bad for his heart disease and would have been bad for his muscle strength. And, the heart is a muscle. It needs protein. And I think that one of the reasons I got my 24 months instead of 3 months is that I didn't jump on the bandwagon and say, oh, let me put him on a restricted protein diet. So dogs, if you look at AFCO, even for what they say for cats, they don't have the numbers in front of me, but they say something like dogs are supposed, should have minimum 18% protein and cats should have like 21%. If we allow them to free choice choose their food, dogs are going to pick something that's like 46% protein and cats are going for over 50% protein. So if we look at what Mother Nature tells them they need to eat, and then we look at what the pet food companies tell us to feed them, guess what? Protein is the most expensive ingredient in the bag, box, or can. And if a pet food company can convince you that corn and wheat, which are much cheaper, are going to give your pet a healthier life, what do you think they're going to put in that bag, box, or can? They're going to put the cheaper ingredient that will keep your pet alive, but it's not what they're meant to eat, and it's not going to make them thrive.
Right. And they always want to say that it's a science-backed recipe. It's like, I think science is really in nature. It's like, let's just look and observe what they eat. That's the science.
Yeah. Let's do what Mother Nature says. But if you ever get a chance to read, it's a dog book, but if you ever get to read Dr. Connor Brady's book, Feeding Dogs, it's comparing the myth of raw versus kibble feeding. He's a science nerd, and he looked at literally thousands of studies that have been published by the pet food companies and then studies published by the not pet food companies. And it is all manipulated they'll pick one little piece of the study out and then use that as their evidence, and they will throw away anything that doesn't match the narrative that they're looking for. Reading science literature and scientific articles, we've had the editors of The Lancet, the British Medical Journal, saying, well, yeah, we're paid to publish what they want us to publish, and we are told to bury what doesn't fit the narrative. So we can't even trust the biggest medical journals for human medicine, let alone pet medicine. So you have to read through the narrative to find the truth of what they really need. And then we do have to look at, what do they do in nature? What if I throw 4 things on the floor and let my pet choose, which one are they going to choose? They're going to choose the species appropriate diet.
Right.
They're going to choose, if you have a cat, I'm going to tell you, they're not going for the corn. They're going to go for the mouse. Give them a choice. Hey, I need some meat. This is awesome.
Right. Yeah. And the ingredients that I just rambled off, that's just the ingredients. When you add the quality and the sourcing that we mentioned earlier, plus what the FDA permits to be in the pet food, plus the cancer-causing high heat manufacturing process, no wonder our pets are so sick and staying sick on these prescription foods. I'm going to ask you with your expertise, what are the differences and similarities in prescription therapeutic foods and non-prescription therapeutic foods?
There really is no significant. They're both made with poor ingredients. When we're talking about these dry kibbles from these companies, there's not a lot of difference. And there are, again, some very specific prescription diets for animals in liver failure, or if we want to dissolve stones. But again, those are used for a very short period of time. Animals that are born with genetic diseases like a liver shunt, they're a hybrid category. Yes, we could make a homemade diet with high quality ingredients to support that pet, but it is very specialized. And so there are specialized prescription diets, again, made with poor ingredients, so we could do a better job using whole foods. But that's not something where, if you have an animal with a liver shunt or born with renal dysplasia, that's not something where you're going to go to the pet store and, the big box store and say, well, I'm going to buy this urinary food, labeled for urinary problems versus a prescription one. I don't think that the prescription diets for urinary problems are appropriate for dogs or cats with renal dysplasia.
Thank you.
When we have or these liver problems, I still think that the prescription diets are made with poor quality ingredients and don't support those pets at the level that we could support them. I mean, I've got clients with pets with renal dysplasia that were given a couple of months to live and told, oh, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And we put them on homemade diets using really high quality ingredients. And these animals are stable for years and years and years. I just got an email from somebody the other day with, saying, well, we started this homemade diet for the dog when we found the renal dysplasia, and the dog is like 8 years old now. And, at a year and a half old, they were told, oh, he's going to die. There's nothing we can do about this. It's a management thing. And so I'm not saying that we don't need special diets for a lot of these pets, but what we need is high quality special diets. And so, like I alluded to earlier, there are some companies like Medicus Diets, Just Food for Dogs, Darwin's. There are some of these smaller companies that are using high quality ingredients and making what we're going to term therapeutic diets. And a lot of times, if we have a therapeutic diet for a dog or a cat with renal dysplasia or a liver shunt, you do need a prescription I do recommend a prescription for those, because you want somebody, that's an animal with a very special problem, and you want somebody managing that disease. And you want to make sure that the diet that you're feeding is working for that animal. But why not feed a diet that is specialized for that is made with high quality ingredients versus using a diet that is specialized for that using, the waste products of the human food industry. So, I'm not saying that we don't need therapeutic diets for specific cases, but there's no reason why they couldn't be made with high quality ingredients. And that's what some of these smaller companies are starting to do. Thank goodness.
Yeah, I didn't know that those smaller companies did that. So that's really lovely to see better quality ingredients going into those types of recipes. So the question is, how can therapeutic or RX food cause more damage? Can they cause more damage?
Sure. I mean, like I said, had a patient who died from being on a prescription reducing diet.
Yes.
You can make them worse. So some of the urinary diets, let's say your dog has struvite stones. They're made in a high pH urine. So you put them on a prescription diet that lowers the pH of the urine. Now, all of a sudden, your dog is making oxalate stones because their urine is too acidic. You can take them too far the other way. The animals that are put on these GI biome diets, they don't need to stay on those long term. They just need to be fed high quality food, and maybe they need a probiotic and maybe a little more fiber in their diet.
Right.
There's so many things that we can cure. We can make the symptoms because a lot of times we're not even treating a true disease. We're just treating symptoms. Oh, he's got diarrhea. Diarrhea is not a disease. It's a symptom. And so we put them on a specialized prescription diet for their diarrhea. Well, what are we treating?
Right.
I mean, did they have a fiber responsive diarrhea? Does that mean they just needed more fiber in their diet? And could we have done that with whole foods?
Right.
Did they have an intolerance to the chicken that was in the diet? Did they have an intolerance to the synthetic vitamins and minerals that
Yes.
were in the diet? Like, let's get to the bottom of what's causing the problem rather than just saying, okay, here's a prescription diet, they have to stay on it for life. Like, I'd rather know what's causing it and actually heal it.
Yeah. And I noticed too, from my own experience with my late monkey bean, I was going through things with her. The vet was like, oh, maybe she's allergic to the protein. And at the time, she was only really on chicken. And then when she eventually passed of intestinal lymphoma at 13 years old, and I got in this rabbit hole of learning about pet food and whatnot, I connected the dots and I was like, wait a minute, she wasn't sensitive or allergic to chicken. It was everything else, all the other crap that was in the food, because she only really had dry food her whole life. She did a little wet here and there, but she didn't really care for wet. So she was on a dry food her whole life. And I was like, well, it's all the other ingredients. It's the sourcing, it's the quality, it's the high heat manufacturing process that causes these cancer causing carcinogens. And I'm like, that is what she was having the vomiting and the digestive upset to. It wasn't the protein. So I think, and I hear this a lot from pet parents of like, oh, they're allergic to this protein and that protein. And there probably are some pets out there that do.
True food allergies are rare. A true food allergy is going to be like an allergy. They swell up in their face, they get all itchy. Vomiting and diarrhea are food intolerances. They're not true
Right.
allergies.
And more than likely, when that is happening, I encourage everybody to look at the quality of the food that you're feeding and what you're feeding versus the protein, because more than likely it's coming from other things in that food. So if you were to get whole foods, good quality, I'm sure those intolerances will subside. So I mentioned earlier what I call feeding the beast, and I just want to take a moment to explain this detrimental self-feeding cycle the big pet food corporate companies have established by way of vertical control over us, the pet food industry, and pet industry as a whole, and how we as pet parents feed into this cycle. These big pet food corporate umbrella companies make the commercial and prescription therapeutic diets your pet eats that are getting and keeping them sick. They own the vet clinics and hospitals we take our sick pet to for care. They own the diagnostic companies overseeing how your pet is diagnosed and puppeteer the protocols, referrals, and diets that get recommended. They are even beginning to acquire pet insurance companies and other pet services like pet sitting and dog walking. So remind you, they own the prescription therapeutic diets in their vet clinics and hospitals that are imposed upon pet parents, which again are the same ingredients, quality, and sourcing in their commercial non-therapeutic diets that got your pet sick in the first place. And pet parents unknowingly feed into this vertical control stratagem, keeping this vicious life cycle alive. Oftentimes, vet staff lead you to believe your pet must stay on these therapeutic prescription diets in order for your pet to survive whichever illness that plagues them. So you then become hostage to the vet office and one brand of food. You become a repeat customer buying the same products over and over and over again that got them sick in the first place, but this time with a fancy name and paywall. Our pets remain sick on these therapeutic prescription diets, and the vet visits and bills continue or even rise with the addition of meds thrown onto new and old problems, constantly feeding and financing big pet food companies' entire life cycle. They keep your pet sick, they keep you coming in. We are feeding the beast. It's a never-ending, never-healing, vicious cycle. Your pet will continue to decline slowly and in some cases rapidly, and you won't even know what happened. It's all behind a facade wall. And I just want to note, our pets lose in the end and often pay with their life. They stay sick and oftentimes get sicker. These commercial therapeutic prescription foods do not heal or healthfully manage health conditions. They add fuel to the fire, suppressing symptoms and often causing new symptoms to arise. We must turn our focus on truly helping our pets heal with real, fresh, species-appropriate foods and getting or keeping their immune system strong so that their body can do what it's meant to do, which is heal itself, and it can do that with the right resources. So, what are your thoughts on feeding the beast?
Yeah, we kind of can't blame the veterinarians because it's all they're taught, it's all they know. Veterinarians are not taught anything about whole foods. They're not taught anything about those ingredients other than these are absolutely fine, absolutely appropriate. So we can't, it's I call it brainwashing, but they're only taught one side of the story. 99% of the veterinarians would be incapable of designing and prescribing a homemade diet that was complete and balanced, particularly for a medical problem. They're just not taught that. So we can't get mad at them for prescribing prescription or therapeutic diets because they don't have any other options. They don't know any other options. And, you're the pet owner, you come in with your cat and you're like, well, I want to make my own food. How do I do that? They're like, you can't. And the reason you can't is because we can't tell you how to do it. You can, and there are resources out there. My website's one of them, but there are a lot of resources for being able to make your own pet foods. But the veterinarians, it's really not their fault. Like, we make it sound like, oh, they're just churning this big wheel to make money. And I will say, when we go to business management meetings, they're like, oh, well, prescription diets or therapeutic diets could account for 20% of your income in your clinic. That would be huge. Profit margins on food are a lot less than on other things, but there is a profit margin. And if you sell enough of it, like the clinic that I started in, where we sold every single animal that came in the door was on a prescription diet, big profit margins. But we don't know. Most veterinarians don't know any other way to do it. And so we can't blame it all on them. We can blame it on the pet food industry that has influenced them so incredibly and made it so that they don't know any other. Like when I was in my internal medicine class and we discussed kidney disease, like here's the symptoms of kidney disease. Here's how you diagnose kidney disease. Here's how you treat kidney disease. Everybody gets KD, kidney diet. Because at that point we only had Hills. Now there's a bunch of other ones. Oh, this animal has heart disease. Okay, this is how you diagnose it. This is, the medications that you use to treat it, and you put them on HD. That was our internal medicine class. Everything was attached to this is the therapeutic diet that you use. So they don't know any better. And until we can change the educational system and until we can get them to understand that there's another way to do it, the poor pet owners are stuck in the middle with, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I definitely understand that of how they weren't taught that. But I think like as adults, we're always evolving. We're always picking up information, even with clients going into their offices and mentioning raw food or species appropriate, they know of it. So I think it's up to their own discretion on whether or not they want to research it and learn more about it.
But they literally are taught in school that raw diets are going to kill the entire family. Oh my gosh, bacteria. Like I have walked into vet clinics where they have big signs on the wall that say, raw feeding is going to kill your family. Bacteria, blah, blah, blah. I was on a trip up north in my RV to teach something in Nova Scotia. One of my dogs developed hemorrhagic gastroenteritis during the trip. He got very stressed out. I had to take him to a veterinary clinic to get him some IV fluids and some things to get things back under control so that he wouldn't die. And when I walked in, they had those big signs on their wall. And I said, well, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut and not say that I feed my dog a raw diet because they're guaranteed they're going to say, oh my God, it's salmonella. This is from your raw diet,
Right.
which it wasn't. It was from stress. Some IV fluids and he did great. So, they really, truly are brainwashed to think that it is impossible to do this any other way. So it's a little bit hard. Like I get mad at the veterinary industry for a lot of things. but it is a little bit hard for them because they come out of school. So I don't know if you're familiar with the movie that Cole Harrington did called Pet Food. It's
Yes.
available on Netflix and Amazon and everywhere else. But he basically goes inside the pet food industry and films how the food is made, the extrusion process, the ingredients that go into it. The vet schools show that to the students and tell them everything that Cole says is completely wrong, that all of that processing and all of those ingredients are absolutely fine. And they actually give them instruction on how to fight back against
Oh,
clients who
gosh.
come in spouting all of those things. So again, do we blame the veterinarians who literally are told that all of us pet owners who want to feed raw or gently cooked or homemade are wrong? That's what they are taught. So, like I said, it's going to be up to the pet parents to bring those changes about. I get emails just about every day from veterinarians and veterinary students who are pretty fed up with what they're being fed, and they want to know, how do I go holistic? Like, I've seen the light of day. How do I change? And so we are making an inroad. But the veterinarians, the traditional veterinarians, if you could get into their insider groups on social media, you would see that they really, really don't like the clients who come in and say, I want to feed raw, I want to feed
Mm.
gently cooked, I want to make my own food. It really upsets them because they are taught the opposite and they don't like it. And the reason they don't like it is because it challenges what they think is true.
Right.
So, what I can say to pet parents is stick with your guns. There are much better ways to feed our pets. There are so many small, really good food companies out there now. It is possible to find really high quality food without rendered ingredients, without meat meals, without synthetic vitamins and minerals. And, if people want to get those lists and find out what foods qualify, Susan Thixton's
Mm.
truthaboutpetfood.com, best place. Her list is absolutely worth paying for. It's like $10. Absolutely worth. She puts a new one out every year. I have a smaller list of things that I rotate through when I feed my pets that people can get on my website. So there are ways that we can do this. There are recipes you can get that are balanced if you want to make your own food. I would make my own food in a heartbeat rather than feed prescription or therapeutic diets, unless it was made by a company that uses only human grade ingredients.
Yeah, and that perfectly takes me to this next question. Therapeutic pet food is marketed, sold, and recommended as the best food and usually only food to manage whatever ailment the pet is experiencing. What is your advice to someone who is experiencing a common or not so common health condition with their pet and they're being advised to go onto a therapeutic prescription food or is currently on one?
My book, Keeping Your Pets Naturally Healthy, has 42 recipes for dogs and cats.
Beautiful.
For liver disease, kidney disease, pancreatitis, whatever. You can make your own food. It takes a commitment. The problem with making your own food and the reason veterinarians don't like it is what we call recipe drift. So people have a recipe that's balanced and they're like, I couldn't find the chicken liver this week, so I left it out. You can't do that. When a recipe has a bunch of ingredients, it has those ingredients or those supplements because they're needed to make it balanced. Like, you
Right.
don't want to feed your cat a recipe that doesn't have a calcium source in it long term. You don't want to feed cats recipes that are deficient in B vitamins. You'll end up with a blind cat and heart failure with brain disease. So, it's really important that when we're doing this from a homemade perspective, if that's what we want to do, that we find recipes that are balanced, that work for our pet, that we know we can stick with. And if you can't, and I've done consultations with people who don't know how to boil water, don't know how to turn on their oven, can't do anything other than microwave a TV dinner. Well, you know what? They make TV dinners for animals now too that are high quality, and all you have to do is warm them up. So, the pet food industry has taken the bull by the horns and said, what do we need to do to make this convenient and easy for people to feed high quality food to their pets? And so there are a lot of good companies out there now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just if you don't have the time or the knowledge or don't even want to get into homemade.
Desire.
Yeah. There's so many other companies that are doing pre-made, and you consulted with All Provide, right? So it's gently cooked.
Yes. A lot of the recipes on All Provide are my recipes. So they have the constitutions for dogs. We have cat loaf for the kitty cats, pup loaf for the dogs. But there's a lot of good companies. Karen Becker consults with a lot of companies as well. I know she did help formulations for Raised Right. I can't think of all the other companies that she's helped. But, there are a lot of holistic veterinarians who are now helping a lot of these food companies make therapeutic diets, human grade food without all the synthetics added to them. So there's a lot of ways you can do it now.
Yeah. This might be a silly question or not so silly question, but in your opinion, can a fresh food species appropriate diet replace prescription or veterinary therapeutic pet food formulas?
Yes.
Okay.
Pretty much every time.
Okay. That's good to know, because I know you said that there are some therapeutic formulas that are...
Right. So, for instance, the liver shunt dogs. I mean, I have recipes for liver shunt dogs that, they're going to be lower in protein using very high quality proteins. We have to replace the proteins with something else. So, yes, you could get a prescription diet for that. You can make your own. You just need to work with someone for your specific pet to make sure that the diet's going to work for you. And then, do you have the desire, the time, the ability to continue making it? And if not, then you either need to find one of these newer companies that is making that specific diet that you need, or you're stuck with the prescription diets that are out there that are kind of icky.
Right. Well, we will have the Susan Thixton resource, the Connor Brady book, Petfold, and all of your things, the food list that you offer. I also have a food list. We'll have all of that linked in this episode's pod blog at theholisticfeline.com.
Okay. And you should have gotten an offer from us with using the code Feline50 for 50% off our Feline Essentials PEA.
Yes, that will also be in the pod blog. All right. So let's talk about you and all the things that you do real quick. So you have so many amazing resources and things you offer. You've touched on a lot of it, and I'm going to tell the world everything. So you have Dr. Judy U, an amazing educational resource offering courses on an array of topics. I highly recommend you all utilize this and empower yourselves, along with her blog that is incredibly informative and vast in topics. You also have 8 best-selling books providing healthful species-appropriate recipes and information on raising and keeping our pets naturally healthy. You have an online store full of amazing natural, holistic, and highly vetted products. You're host to your own Naturally Healthy Pets podcast, creator of the Naturally Healthy Pets Experience, a multi-day educational opportunity for pet parents, professionals, vet students, and staff to gather and learn from industry professionals speaking on how to care for our pets naturally. And amongst all of this, you still offer very limited consults. Is that correct?
Very limited, but we also have about a dozen holistic veterinarians in our group that will accept consultations if I'm out of time.
Okay. Very good to know. And I feel like everyone should utilize those resources as well. But this is amazing. And you are a plethora of life-saving information and resources. Thank you for making all of this available to everyone so that we may all live better. And did I miss anything?
I think that just about covers it.
Can you let everyone know your social handles, website, all the lovely resources and outlets?
We are on just about every social media platform under Dr. Judy Morgan's Naturally Healthy Pets or Naturally Healthy Pets. We are putting out content all the time, and our goal is to be an educational resource for people. So I used to tell people we've had to change it a little bit because for FDA compliance, we're not allowed to say that, turmeric is good for arthritis. We can say turmeric is good for joint health. So it makes it a little bit difficult for when people want to search for something. But I used to say to people, listen, if your pet has a problem, give it a name, pancreatitis, arthritis, dermatitis, allergies, whatever. in your search engine, put my name and whatever it is you're searching for, you're probably going to come up with a video, a blog, a
Yes.
social media post, a something,
Yes.
whether it's, something in my books, whatever. I've been doing this for a long time, so there's a lot of stuff online.
And that's exactly what I do. If I have something where I'm like, I don't know much about this, or I need to know more, or what are the holistic treatments, or, like for dental health, I found your holistic stuff for dental health. And I was like, Dr. Judy will have it. So I Googled it, and I do the same for, like I said, all my clients and stuff. I'm like, just Google whatever you're interested in and do Dr. Judy. Like, she'll have a blog, she'll have an Instagram, she'll have something on it. Like, it's
Pretty much.
absolutely amazing. Yes. And I encourage everybody to utilize it. It's literally life-saving. Promise. So if you could sum up your final thoughts on prescription food, therapeutic food, what would it be?
Man, they're awful. Most of them. Like I said, the newer companies are, we're seeing changes. So again, this is holistic veterinarians and pet owners saying we're mad as heck and we're not going to take it anymore. And so somebody saying, hey, I see a need, and that the need is let's make real food that will solve the problems. And literally for cats, in practice, things that used to make me crazy, cats with chronic constipation that would come to me. And it's like, okay, you've got this obese, dry cat who's older. Like, their coat's dry, their stool is dry, they don't have enough moisture, and you're just feeding them more and more dry food, and it's just making this huge clog. So we get them unclogged, and then we put them on a high moisture, species appropriate diet. And it's like, poof, look at that. The problem went away. We don't have to deal with that anymore. And you've been for years getting your cat unclogged, and nobody ever wanted to change the diet. Usually what ends up happening from a traditional standpoint, they get put on a very high fiber dry diet, which actually makes it worse.
Yeah.
So cats with chronic urinary problems, will get them off dry food. And, like I said, cats can be very difficult to get them to change over. It took me 6 months the first time I tried to change my kibble kitties over to raw food. I remember the first time I brought home frozen raw little patties for them. They batted them around like hockey pucks. I'm like, well, this is going well. But eventually we did get them to eat their hockey pucks. You got to thaw them out and warm them up. That does help. But it is possible to switch all cats. And we have a course on getting your cats to switch over because it can be a process. I don't think that any pet, frankly, needs to stay on a poorly made therapeutic diet made with poor quality ingredients. I think that any pet who's on a therapeutic diet that is made with poor quality ingredients could be switched to something homemade or human grade or very close to human grade, with good processing and well made. Don't be a slave to that. Got to go in every month and get another case of this therapeutic diet or bag of this therapeutic diet. There are other options.
Yeah, I think the moral of the story is that maybe foregoing those types of diets, whether if it's prescription therapeutic or not, and opt for a fresh food, whole food, species appropriate, whether we're doing homemade or the amazing pre-made companies that are out there as well, I think. And then adding in whatever they feel that they need, like you mentioned, omega-3s, and you'll see a much better improvement in health going that route than keeping them on the other. So in general, do you have any final thoughts or knowledge you'd like to share with the world before we let you go?
I would just like all pet parents to be empowered to basically take control of your pet's health. For dogs, when we see people online going, oh, he had a great life, he lived to 11. That's a half a life in my book.
Mine too.
For cats, I really want to see them well into their 20s.
Me too.
I think there's no reason why they can't if we back off on the pesticides and the chemicals and the vaccines and the bad quality food. And I think we can make such a difference in our animals' lives. And I mean, most of my dogs are living into their late teens. I met with a client that I haven't seen for a few years out in Arizona when I was out there recently. And I said, oh, well, you remember when you came to me with your German Shepherd and he was so sick and his allergies were so bad and it took us so long to get everything straightened out. And I said, but he had a great life. He lived to 13, which is really good for a 125-pound shepherd. And they looked at me and they said, 13? He lived to 16. Well, you forget. And I was like, oh my gosh, 16 is a 125-pound shepherd. That's what we should be seeing.
Right.
Again, saying, 11 or 12. No.
Yeah.
I have Great Danes that are living to 16. This is what we should be expecting. And I think if we change our mindset and change what we're doing with our pets, and like my dog that had the heart failure and then the kidney failure, he died at 10, but he had a genetic issue.
Right.
So, there are some things like we can't fight Mother Nature. But again, he was given 3 months to live and we got 24 high quality months. So we can always manipulate things. And I never give up hope because I think there's so many things that we can do for our animals.
Yeah.
People need to kind of change their mindset a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, when my little one passed at 13, I thought she was going to live to be 18. And so when she passed at 13, I was like, that's so premature and so young. She had so much more life to live. And now I'm learning that they can, live to be in their 20s or, so, I mean, that's extremely young at 13. If you think that they could live to be 21 or 25, we need to change things, do things differently. But as a little reminder to everyone, Dr. Judy is coming back for part 2 and the next episode talking about medication and the overuse of medication, and then also providing holistic alternatives that we could use instead. And then there'll be so much more in that one as well. So for now, I want to thank you so much for being here and lending your voice on such a frustrating aspect in pet health. We have been misled by the shepherds in the industry for almost a full century, 88 years to be exact, in this year of 2026. So thank you for your honesty and educating the world. Thank you for this conversation and your expertise. I admire your persistence in bringing this type of information to light. Please never stop being you, and I will forever be a part of your fan club.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Holistic Feline and Friends podcast. It is created, hosted, produced, and released with love, and my hope is you learn something along the way. When we know better, we do better. Please share your knowledge and our podcast with others. For more educational content, follow us on your favorite podcast platform, as well as Instagram at The Holistic Feline and online at theholisticfeline.com, where you will also find our blog that includes corresponding posts for each podcast episode with links to all the good stuff. Thank you again. We'll see you in the next episode.
The Holistic Feline and Friends podcast, website, blog, and socials are for informational and educational purposes only. All information, suggestions, recommendations, or comments, whether by written, verbal, audio, or otherwise either direct, indirect, or association, is not a substitute for professional veterinary care. Please provide your pets with a minimum annual professional veterinary visit, and more often when health concerns arise. The Holistic Feline, Angela Warwick, and all guests and associates are speaking from experience and education. Please continue your research and form your own opinion. This is in no way a means to diagnose.